Welcome back, Weirds and Weeboos, to the channel Bitch and Doge, where today I'm doing a tier list of all the perks in Black Ops 4. And heads up, I'm going to do a lot of preamble, so timestamps are provided if you don't want to hear about this. But there's a lot that I do want to say going into this tier list to explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how the criteria works. So first things first, why only Black Ops 4 perks? Well, I'd love to make an entirely separate video on this if you're interested, but for the most part, I'm just going to try and stay on topic here. So unfortunately, I am going to just have to say this and not really explain myself, and if you want me to explain myself, I can make a separate video about it. I think that perk balancing is so off the walls, incoherent, what the fuck in all the older games, that there's not even really a point in doing a tier list. Like what? Am I going to sit here and tell you, you know what? Hot take? I think Juggernog is a good perk. And everyone's going to be like, wow, this is some banger content. I can't believe I've come across this. There isn't really much of an interesting discussion to be had about the strength of perks before Black Ops 4. Because for the most part, for 99% of perks, you were either one of the broken perks you literally had to take, otherwise you would probably be screwed, or you were one of the perks that in theory had a nice effect, but ultimately the power of your effect was so dwarfed by the absolutely ludicrous potential of other perks that you would literally never want to take it thanks to the 4 perk limit. I think the only place I could have any kind of interesting discussion is there is a small sweet spot where there are a couple perks that are the right power level to where there is actually a bit of a debate to be had on how good they are. Things like Staminup and things like PhD Flopper are in this sort of region where you can take them, but they're not auto-taken. They're a bit more playstyle dependent. Electric Cherry is another good example. But yeah, let's be real. For the most part, you don't really get to pick your perks that much in the older games, at least unless you're throwing on purpose for the sake of fun and experimenting. If you actually want to do anywhere near decent in these games, you need Juggernog, you need Speed Cola. If this is Black Ops 2 or 3, then you need Double Tap 2.0 because it got upgraded in those games to make it stupidly powerful. And if you're playing solo, you need Quick Revive. And there's all 4 of your perk slots gone. Now, of course, I'm pitching this in a pretty open-ended way because I know that there's a lot of people watching that aren't big Zombies fans, but probably played a bit on the side. But if you are a big Zombies fan, you already know this is why the perk system got completely reworked in Black Ops 4 in the first place. And you probably have strong opinions on it. In the past, it used to be, when this game first came out, that everyone hated the new perk system, and I think still the majority think they don't like it, but definitely the temperature has cooled around the issue, and more people are starting to realize that maybe they were a bit too harsh on Black Ops 4. I'll get this out of the way quickly, just so no one else is saying this in the comments or reading in positions that I don't have. My position on the Black Ops 4 perk system is this. Black Ops 4 does have very fundamental problems with the gameplay, but none of them are down to the perk system. I think the only problem that the perk system really has is the way that they replace double tap means that you have to use the pack-punch machine 5 times to fully upgrade your gun now, and I will fully agree that is really tedious and frustrating. But the ways that they went about replacing Speed Cola, Quick Revive, and Juggernog, I'm all completely happy with. I think they were an improvement to the game and perk balancing. I think that they added tons of variety to the new perk system, so you could actually pick the perks you wanted to based on your playstyle or just which perks you think are fun to use, rather than thinking, man, I would love to use that perk, but like, I literally need Juggernog to survive, and this weapon has too long a reload to not take Speed Cola, and it doesn't do enough damage to not need double tap, and it's solo, so I need a Quick Revive, so oops. But for all the defending I will do of it, I will also say this. For how hard Black Ops 4 tried to bend over backwards to fix the broken perk system, I just think the best way to fix it is to remove the perk limit. And I mean, I think thankfully that's not a hot take anymore. I think this is the kind of thing where people almost pretend they never even disagreed with this in the first place, but before Cold War Zombies came out, and they actually did remove the perk limit finally, I heard a lot of people saying that would make it OP though, and it wouldn't be balanced, and you'd be too strong, and the game would be too easy. But now that people have actually played without a perk limit, I think it's pretty unanimous. Everyone knows that perk limit was a stupid idea from day one, an opinion I have always held ever since Black Ops 1 when the perk limit was first added. So long story short, essentially I think it's more interesting to do a ranking of Black Ops 4 perks because they're a lot more balanced. There's actually a lot more of an argument that this one is maybe better than this one, is maybe worse than this one. Not to mention, as much as people like to say that this game didn't fix the issue of getting rid of crutch perks because everyone still just runs the same amount of perks anyways, I just think that that argument's kind of ridiculous. Every single time I watch someone different playing Black Ops 4, they've got a different set of 4 perks, because it seems that no one can agree on which perks are the best in this game. even the one perk that almost everyone agrees is the new crutch perk that you need to get, Dying Wish, which we'll get to later, I might have some different things to say. We'll get to that in a moment. Either way, that brings me to the last thing I want to say for this list. That being, I'd actually like to do it mostly based around hardcore difficulty. Now, what's that about? Well, earlier, you know how I said that I still agree that Black Ops 4 has big problems, just not in the perk system? It is mostly in the way that the rounds progress. The fact that zombies continuously get faster in this game and even eventually start doing increased damage does make it so eventually you hit a point where it is really, really hard to survive using honest methods. And it really, really encourages camping and cheese strats where you can live forever. Not to mention that this game probably has more cheese strats in it than a Wallace and Gromit short. However, if you didn't realise, and fair enough if you didn't, because I didn't until recently, almost every kind of well-known cheese in Black Ops 4 only works on normal difficulty, or easy. Now, most people do play on normal difficulty, and up until now, if anything, I actually like to play on easy, just because, well, if I know that Black Ops 4 is not super regarded as a super difficult game anyway, I'm not going to be going for difficult high rounds on it. I'm going to be chilling out, I'm going to be trying to do Easter egg steps and all that, and it's a lot easier if I'm doing it on easy. At least, that was before I realised that some Easter eggs are disabled on easy, but you get the point either way. I actually already did try doing this list based on normal difficulty, and I just felt like it didn't make for a great video, because I'm not kidding, there were 4 perks in my S tier, and all 4 of them were solely there because they could cheese the game stupid hard. In fact, 3 out of 4 of the perks that I put in S tier weren't even good perks, they just had something you could abuse to live forever on them. But like, aside from that cheese strat, they weren't even that good. Only one of the perks in S tier was a perk that I actually think is really good. It just so happened, as well as being really good, it had a cheese strat, which means literally everything in S tier was cheese. Not even genuinely good perks, just perks you could use to abuse the game. However, for the most part, most of these cheese strats aren't gonna work on hardcore difficulty because of the fact that in hardcore, there is no health cap. Which you might not have even known that existed, but in Black Ops 4, they introduced a health cap to the zombies. On normal or easy difficulty, eventually they stop getting more health. And that means that if you're using a weapon that does enough damage, certain weapons that were never meant to insta-kill forever suddenly, well, insta-kill forever. Probably most infamously the Helian Salvo, the rocket launcher in the game. Kind of funny, considering rocket launchers have been some of the worst weapons in zombies for the longest time, but of course the Helian Salvo changed that, becoming the most broken weapon in the game, where you could infinitely live forever by just looking at the floor and spamming shoot. No aim nor brain required. Now, if you're less familiar with the difficulty system in Black Ops 4, you might be amazed that people even generally prefer normal difficulty if it has all these glaring issues. But I think I must give credit where it's due, there is a reason why people don't really like to play on hardcore. That at first made me pretty averse to it as well. That being that while on easy it would take 5 hits to kill you, the amount of hits it would take to kill you with Jug in Black Ops 3, and on normal it would take 4 hits to kill you, the amount of hits it would take to kill you with Jug if you were playing any game before Black Ops 3, on hardcore you only got 3 hits before you were dead. And again, there's no Jug in this game, so that's 3 hits and you're out, which is pretty brutal. And it was the main thing that kind of kept me away for a bit. But now that I've actually given it a proper go, I'm starting to see the magic of playing on hardcore. It very much brings back the kind of joy that I think wasn't there initially in Black Ops 4. Especially because the one concern I had was just burst dying out of nowhere unexpectedly. But there are a lot of mechanics in Black Ops 4 that in normal difficulty feel like overcompensation and way too many free bailouts, but in hardcore, because of how few hits you get to die, the amount of bailouts you have actually starts to feel like it makes a lot of sense, and almost feels like the remaining health bar that you don't have anymore is compensated for by the amount of panic buttons you get. So yeah, for the sake of a more interesting list, this is going to be based off of mostly hardcore difficulty. With that said, let's get into it. First up is Timeslip, one of the new perks in Black Ops 4, and a weird one. That being because, in Black Ops 4, if you get all 4 of your perks, whichever perk is in your 4th slot can get a modifier effect, where it gets a bonus effect. As a result, the one in your 4th slot will cost more to buy since it gets an extra effect. And in most cases, the modifier effect is a nice bonus, but not the reason you buy the perk. But there are a couple perks where that's the exception. And yeah, I'm not even going to try and bury the lead here. I think that Timeslip is one of those few perks. You see, the base perk of Timeslip is very convenient, but not very strong, I would say. The base perk of Timeslip makes it so that traps have a reduced cooldown, so you can use them more often. Makes it so that the random weapons box gives you a weapon almost immediately, so you don't have to wait for it to randomize a weapon. and makes it so the Pack-a-Punch almost immediately spits your gun back out, so you can Pack-a-Punch much faster. Now, in fairness, the number one time you are going to die is when precariously trying to Pack-a-Punch or grab a gun mid-round, and this perk does help with that. Not to mention, Timeslip is really good in conjunction with fire sales, because it's not just convenience, you literally get more box hits per fire sale because of the fact that you can hit the box faster. So I wouldn't say the base perk of Timeslip is just convenience. There is some genuine, this might actually help you survive or might have an actual impact on your game. There's a little bit of that there. That being said, definitely the actual tangible benefit of Timeslip beyond just convenience is quite minor. In fairness, it is one of the cheapest perks in the game at 1,500, at least at base, but yeah, I wouldn't waste a perk slot on it in most cases if I was just using the base perk. But we're not just talking about the base perk. What about its modifier effect? Well, the modifier effect makes it more than double in cost, because the modifier is, weirdly enough, honestly way more impactful than the entire base perk, because it adds 2 extra effects to Timeslip. It makes both your equipment and your specialist weapon recharge faster. So to get everyone up to speed that maybe didn't play up to Black Ops 4 Zombies, first of all, your equipment is just the new name for your special grenades, like monkey bombs. In this game, they removed the normal grenades since you didn't really use them anyway, and just made the equipment slot the one grenade slot. And they also added lots of grenade types that are way better than the usual ones you got in old days in Zombies. So getting your grenades back faster is actually quite a big deal, especially because, again, it will count things like monkey bombs. On top of that, you can just start with Wraith Fires in Black Ops 4, a type of grenade that is essentially like a Molotov that doesn't burn you, and yeah, it doesn't have a super big area of effect with the fire, but the fire does such massive damage that at least on normal difficulty, it practically insta-kills forever. On higher difficulties, it will eventually stop insta-killing, but it still takes a while and still does insane damage to zombies for just one throwable item that can be thrown so quickly and activates immediately. But we're not even at the best bit. The specialist weapon recharge. Specialist weapons were introduced in Black Ops 3, but weren't all that prevalent until Black Ops 4. Essentially, these would be weapons that wouldn't go into either of your weapon slots, that instead you'd have to get kills to charge up, and once you charge them up, you could activate them to get the ability to temporarily use a super weapon that would insta-kill forever and do something really impressive. And in Black Ops 4, they even added the extra bonus that activating your specialist weapon would not only give you 2 hits worth of armor to block hits from the zombies temporarily, but it would also make it so that when you activated your specialist, regardless of what your weapon was, it would activate a blast around you that would immediately insta-kill all zombies touching you. So long story short, your specialist is one of your best bailout buttons in this game for when you're about to die. It is just an immediate, I hit my specialist and now I'm not dead. And so if you combine that with the ludicrous power of equipment in this game, and that also recharging faster, equipment itself can be used as a sort of light version of that instant bailout, but even still a massive potential for a bailout. So the fact that both of your most important sort of mechanics for bailing you out of trouble recharge much faster when Timeslip is in your modifier slot means that the amount of power you can get out of the Timeslip in the modifier slot is kind of ridiculous. For that reason, Timeslip is A tier. I think Timeslip is actually a really, really good perk if you put it in the modifier slot. I think without the modifier slot, as a disclaimer, I'd probably put it like here, but with modifier slot, A tier, absolutely. Next up is Quick Revive, and oh man, this one hurts me. Okay, so they reworked Quick Revive in this game, and I like what they did. Essentially, I already mentioned, they wrapped the self-reviving mechanic into just a base mechanic of the game, so you don't need Quick Revive to self-revive anymore, you just get those for free. Instead, Quick Revive, as usual, lets you revive teammates twice as fast, but now it has a bonus effect that activates even if it's in solo. That being that when you have Quick Revive, you also start regenerating health sooner after getting hit, which is actually a pretty big deal. It does make it cost more, but not a whole lot more. 2,000 instead of the old 1,500. If it's put in the modifier slot, then the bonus it'll get is that when you start regenerating health, you will get an insane speed boost temporarily you can use to just run at light speed and get the hell out of there for big clutch plays. But the reason why I'm kind of almost reluctant to give my ranking here is because I love Quick Revive, man. I wish I could tell you Quick Revive is S tier. Quick Revive, the reworked Quick Revive in this game feels so good to use, both as a base perk on its own and with the modifier. The modifier effect is insanely fun, and definitely some of the most fun I've had in Black Ops 4 in general is clutching up with the insane speed boost from the Quick Revive modifier. And I still think, even to this day, the reworked Quick Revive is a little bit underrated. That being said, I can't put it in S, I've got to put it in B, and it hurts to do that. The reason why Quick Revive isn't all it's cracked up to be is 2 reasons that are just... they kind of suck. Actually, more like 3. So first of all, in Black Ops 4, we're kind of going back to camping being the strat on most maps. And when you are doing a camping strat instead of a trading strat where you're running all over the place, if you're just camping in one spot, if you start to get overrun, you probably aren't going to be saved by regenerating health faster because you can't even get out of the danger. It's just do or die. Kill the thing that's about to kill you or die. Unlike a training strategy where you can actually dodge around, you don't really get a window to actually use the health regeneration that Quick Revive provides, which is kind of devastating, honestly. Combine that with the fact that on hardcore, with the 3 hits to die, you're often dying really suddenly and in bursts, which means that regenerating health, once again, isn't as important as it is in a normal zombies game. And lastly, another perk that we're not yet at on this list that can also be used to bail you out in these situations, but just does a much better job than Quick Revive. If you have the slots free, you can pair Quick Revive with this perk we're going to mention later, and it's not necessarily a terrible idea. It's just it's difficult to make the space to run both the perk that kind of outclasses Quick Revive and Quick Revive together. And so as a result, I sadly do have to put it at B, but let the record show it's a high B. I do think that Quick Revive is... I would say would be one of the best perks if this game was more honest, but Black Ops 4 is a very cheesy game. Speaking of beloved perks going a little bit lower than people probably hope, Staminup. Now, I will admit, and I know this isn't a great way to start my ranking, but I just want to be transparent here. There are going to be some things where I will have to admit I do not know how this works. Because of the fact that, you know, going into this sort of zombie fandom stuff, I was expecting these games would be pretty well documented, considering Call of Duty is like one of the biggest game franchises out there. And there's plenty of more obscure franchises that I'm into that have really, really thorough information on how everything works on their wikis. But I was surprised to see that actually CoD Zombies is terrible for actually documenting how its mechanics work. Honestly, half the wiki articles I have seen while trying to do research for videos on CoD Zombies have just been essentially a summary of what the gun is or what the map is with like no information on stats or how mechanics work, which has been kind of annoying, honestly. I say that to preempt the fact that I don't know if I actually understand what Staminup's modifier fully does. The base perk, I know what it does. You see, in previous games, it would make you run faster, and it would give you significantly improved stamina, as in it would allow you to sprint longer before you ran out of sprint. And Staminup was great in those older games. However, in Black Ops 4, as far as I can tell, you have infinite stamina by default. It doesn't seem like there's ever a point at which your sprint stops or slows down. It always seems to be the same speed. So, while Staminup still makes you run faster, if it doesn't actually give the stamina boost anymore, that's a pretty significant nerf, honestly. Considering I would say that was the more significant part of Staminup's boost. Now, I will say this, I see a lot of people run Staminup in the modifier slot, and that provides 2 benefits according to the menu. The first benefit I do understand, that being the ability to shoot while sprinting. A convenient and fun ability, but not one I consider to be all that great, considering that when you try and sprint and shoot at the same time, you will not be able to shoot in anything even approximating a straight line, and so you'll waste a lot of bullets if you try and play this way. So as fun and quirky as it is, I don't really think it's a great modifier ability. That being said, I think most people run Staminup in the modifier slot for the second ability, but this is the one that confuses me. The second ability says that once it's in the modifier slot, you will have permanent full sprint. Now, I'm lost on this because as far as I can tell, you already have that. I'm pretty sure if you run no stamina, you just run at full speed anyway, and you never run out of steam. I don't know if there is eventually a subtle slowdown that kicks in that I'm just not aware of, but if it's there, it's gotta be tiny. Because no matter how long I play this game, I still for the life of me can't figure out what this actually means. It just feels like it's no different from without stamina. As a result, as far as I'm aware, all you can really do with Staminup is run a bit faster, but you don't get to run longer because you're already running forever, and shoot while running, which I already mentioned is niche. So honestly, Staminup, not that great a perk in my opinion. In fact, I will say, if I was being really strict here, I would say D is the more appropriate tier. I'm just putting it in C, because realistically, if you're trying to do things on maps, you're not just playing the map to get a high round, you're trying to do Easter egg steps, you're trying to build the wonder weapon, you're trying to do upgrade steps, then you are going to have to do a lot of running back and forth, and you will save yourself so much time and maybe save your life if you can just run a bit faster. Even if it is, I don't actually know the number, but let's say it's like a 5% speed boost, that kind of feels right. Even if it's just like, oh, you go 5% faster. When you multiply that over the amount of time you spend just running from place to place in a game of zombies, if you're doing Easter egg stuff, you will save a lot of time by running Staminup. But yeah, in terms of pure like high rounding, I think it's honestly down here. But I'm going to keep it at C for now. Up next is Death Perception, which is a bit of a shame. I'm just going to put it in D. I'm not going to dance around it. So Death Perception is a perk I wish was good, and it at least isn't garbage like you might think at first, because it's another one of those perks that presents itself as mostly a quality of life, and yeah, that's kind of true. Basically, for 2,000 points, you will be able to see nearby zombies through walls, and if a zombie is close enough that it might be able to hit you soon, but it's not visible on your screen, you'll get a little arrow on your screen indicating, hey, there's a zombie that's about to hit you to your right, just look to the right, yeah, there it is. And at first, yeah, this just sounds like nothing but quality of life, but no actual help. And it's half true, maybe more than half true. Okay, but listen, hear me out. The one way in which Death Perception can be really good is when you're trying to see if you can sprint in a direction, but because of how random spawns can be and how much you can change how fast zombies spawn or get to barriers, you can be unsure whether you can actually run down this corridor without a zombie spawning at your exit and cutting you off. Because in theory, it seems like you've run here so fast, surely there could be no way you get blocked, but you never know. Sometimes the game just gives you the worst RNG possible. A zombie spawns in 0.1 seconds, super sprints over the barrier, and oh, well, if I was literally here a tenth of a second sooner, I would have lived, but never mind, I'm dead now. And at least with Death Perception, you can actually see that spawning zombie and be like, oh, whoa, that zombie spawned really early. I'm not going to run down that corridor because I'm going to get cut off. I'm going to go this way. And I have already had my life saved a couple times when forcing myself to use Death Perception for the sake of this video by doing that. And that did give me a new appreciation for the perk. But I'm not going to pretend like, oh man, Death Perception's so great. We all underrated it so much. It's still just the sad fact that as nice as that is, it is not worth a perk slot. And you might think the modifier could save it by giving it some real value, but the modifier effect is underwhelming. All it does is it makes it so that shooting the weak spot of specifically boss zombies does increase damage, but only for boss zombies. So, pretty underwhelming, not gonna lie. Next up is Ethereal Razor. Okay, this one's a tough one. Oh god. Because, like, technically it's bad, but it's got a synergy with another perk that makes it good, but even with that synergy, you don't have to run it. Oh god. I'm gonna have to explain this one later. When we get to the perk it synergizes with. I think... Nah, I can't do B. I'm doing C. Ethereal Razor essentially is a really expensive perk at 4,000 points with an effect that's really fun to play around with, but in terms of actual strength is really underwhelming. This was essentially their first attempt at making melee builds actually a thing in zombies, and it wasn't the most well thought out. Essentially, Ethereal Razor will make it so that, first of all, your knife attacks do more damage. Second of all, if you don't get the lunge animation and you just do a normal swipe, you get an AoE attack, so you can hit multiple zombies with one swing of your knife. And third of all, if you do get the lunge animation, you at least get a lifesteal effect where you heal 50 health, or 1 hit's worth, for hitting a zombie with a lunge. And that's without even mentioning the modifier effect, which increases the price even more, but at least gives it the pretty powerful ability in theory that whenever you do lunge at a zombie with a knife, it will insta-kill them forever, as well as having the lifesteal. Obviously that might sound broken, but you got to remember that this not only requires you to get up close and personal, but also the lunge animation specifically makes it so that you can only hit one zombie at a time, and your movement is locked out until the animation completes. So you're often going to die while going for kills with a knife. At the very least, still, it is an infinite insta-kill that doesn't require any kind of ammo. It just requires you to get pretty up close and in the danger zone. Long story short, for the most part, underlined for the most part, melee builds are not a thing in Black Ops 4, there is not enough tools to support them, and the tools that are there are really janky. So Ethereal Razor is fun to play around with, but not really a good idea. Honestly, if it was based purely on its own merits, if I had to be real, I'd put it down here. But the reason why it's here, again, is because of a synergy it has with another perk, which is actually kind of really good. But we'll get to that later. Next up is Blood Wolf Bite. Oh god, this is a weird way. I'm just realizing this is weird. Okay, so I already, tried doing a list like this for normal difficulty I mentioned, and Bloodwolf Bite is not a perk I'm a fan of, for a very simple reason. What it does is it spawns in a wolf companion called Luna, and Luna will run around and pounce on zombies, insta-killing them and knocking over nearby zombies onto the floor so they have to slowly, stand back up, effectively stunning them. So, yeah, Luna's a pretty powerful companion to have, that's really nice and all, just two problems. First of all, the way you even have to summon Luna is by doing a significant amount of damage, in quotes. The game isn't very specific about what qualifies as a significant amount of damage, so I couldn't really give you more detail, and I can't find any more details on the wiki or online, so shrug. But either way, if you're doing a significant amount of damage already, you probably don't need help. Honestly, I've found that the easiest way to get Luna to appear is to use your specialist weapon. But if you use your specialist weapon, you don't need Luna, you have your specialist. Now, in fairness, when Luna does appear without you using your specialist, then that's really good. Then she can be more helpful, except for the fact that if she can appear when you're just using your normal weapon, you're going to constantly summon her on accident when you don't actually need her. And that's a problem, because yes, she is temporary, and yes, she has a cooldown. A very long one at that. So, how do I put this? If you could, on command, decide when Luna spawns, I could see this perk being really, really good. But I just can't get over the fact that ultimately this thing is constantly going to be triggered at random, at times where you didn't mean to summon her, and most often going to be triggered when you're already using your specialist weapon to bail yourself out. At the end of the day, for as powerful as this perk could potentially be, it is mostly going to be inactive when you actually need it, which is a pretty scary thing to reckon with. But there's just one thing I've got to give to Bloodwolf Bite in fairness, and that is, this is now a hardcore tier list, for the most part. And in hardcore, there's no health cap. So insta-kills become far more coveted. Especially because alternate ammo types no longer insta-kill in Black Ops 4, at least for the most part. They got so much weaker in that game compared to Black Ops 3. Unless you're on a map with a wonder weapon that insta-kills forever, there's almost nothing in Black Ops 4 that truly does insta-kill forever in hardcore, so a perk that can do it, at least as far as I'm aware, again, disclaimer, maybe I need to test this more, because I don't use Bloodwolf Bite very often, and I don't know if I've gotten to a very high round with it on hardcore before. I might not have, but as far as I'm aware, I believe it is an insta-kill. With that in mind, oh god, does it go B, just because there's so few insta-kills? Nah, I don't think so. I think it's pretty good still, but I think I've got to put it... I'll put it high C. It would have gone in D in, the other tier list. It went in D in the other tier list, because, again, it's just not up when you need it. But it's definitely more valuable in a situation where damage is so much harder to come by and so much more coveted. Anyway, next up is Zombshell. Now, this is a perk I used to despise, but I admit, when I was forced to use it for the sake of this video, it did grow on me a little bit. But you're going to notice a pattern here with perks that I used to think were garbage that then I gave a chance. I still thought they were garbage after I was done with them, just less garbage. So, Zombshell essentially is a revamp of what Vulture Raid used to do, and that was one of the main reasons I hated it. Because I loved Vulture Raid from Black Ops 2, but it was only ever in one map, Buried, and it never made a return, and I obviously thought that was terrible. I thought it was such a cool and fun perk with so much utility that provided so many different things. And then they just remove it, and then when they try and bring it back, it's this perk that has absolutely zero personality of its own, copies the worst mechanic from Vulture Raid, and ditches the other two mechanics I found to be more interesting. So what does it copy from Vulture Raid? Well, back in Black Ops 2, Vulture Raid would sometimes spawn zombies with gas clouds around them, which, when you killed them, would create a green gas cloud. And if you stood in the gas cloud, you would be invisible to zombies until the gas faded away. Don't get me wrong, being invisible to zombies is a really powerful mechanic, but it's balanced out, unfortunately, by the fact that this is a random mechanic, and oftentimes the gas clouds would spawn in areas that are surrounded by other zombies, making it really, really hard to even reach them in the first place, and honestly, you're more likely to die because you're trying to force yourself to run into a gas cloud than you are just playing normally as if the gas clouds aren't even there. Not to mention, sometimes the gas clouds can actually mess up your training because you don't realize you walk into one and the zombies stop following you, which makes them scatter, and now it's harder to actually dodge the zombies because they're no longer all in one place. This was already kind of the one thing I didn't like about Vulture Raid, and of course, it was the only thing they copied. Only, what I didn't realize was, I'm not going to lie, I used this perk so little that I thought it literally was just the gas effect from Vulturade. But it turns out that's the modifier effect. The base effect of the perk is different. The base effect is that it creates a cloud of gas that is yellow this time rather than green, that actually slows zombies inside it significantly. And the modifier just also makes you invisible in the gas. Although in fairness, the price is massively hiked as well. Where Vulturade, I believe, was 2,000 points, this perk is 4,000. Really expensive. So long story short, the slow is actually a lot better than the invisibility effect, because of the fact that usually the cloud is going to be in the horde of zombies, which isn't very useful for, well, you know, being invisible if you stand inside it, but is useful for trapping zombies inside it because usually it appears on top of them. Again, if you're hoarding up zombies in a big blob and then shooting at them, it's very, very likely that once this activates and creates a gas cloud, the zombies are already going to be in the gas cloud. As well as that, this perk is cooldown based rather than RNG based, so there's a bit more consistency to it, although the cooldown is, as you'd expect, pretty long. If Zombshell could be more consistent, I'm not gonna lie, I would say it has a lot of potential to be a really good perk. But ultimately, yeah, the fact that it triggers the moment you kill a zombie, which means you can't really decide when you want to trigger it very easily, it's kind of hard to not kill zombies to activate this when you actually want it, in a game entirely about killing zombies. Combined with how overpriced it is, literally more pricey than the perk it copied and removed all the benefits from, I still think that Zombshell ain't a great perk. But I used to think that it was garbage and candidate for F tier, and now that I've actually given it a shot, I realise, you know what, there might be some really niche situations where just because of how severe the slow is from the gas cloud, and how much it really can stall the zombies, the issue's just the consistency, maybe you could find a way to make it work. I've tried it a bit in camping strategies, and I'm not sure if it's the best perk, but it actually does not feel bad if you're camping. The main problem is just Winter's Wail, a perk that we'll get to later, is just kind of way better and way more consistent for stalling if that's what you need. But if you can contrive a situation where you need both Zombshell and Winter's Wail, then it's probably worthwhile picking. And that brings us to, here we go, Blaze Phase. I think this is going to be our one and only F tier. I hate Blaze Phase. I hate it so much. So here's the thing. I'll start with something a bit more of a hot take, because most people probably aren't all too shocked with the idea. I think that Blaze Phase is a really bad perk, as well as being super forgettable and not that fun to use. Probably not giving the hottest take there, but I'll follow up with another hot take that is kind of relevant to the point here. I kind of don't like perks like PhD Flopper. Perks that say, hey, we're not actually going to change the way that your guns work, or change your movement, or change anything about your character really. We're going to give you a brand new attack that's just kind of part of you now. It's not a gun that you have, it's not an equipment that you have, it's just a new attack you have. I'm not going to lie, I've always been pretty averse to the idea. But at least when I've seen it done in other contexts, they've made it go in ways that I can be there and think, okay, fair enough. With PhD Flopper, it's obviously the fact that it also provides fall damage and explosive damage immunity, which are some really good benefits, and really the main reason you buy the perk over the flop a lot of the time. Not to mention, I will admit, the flop is particularly funny and iconic, and it is kind of fun to do for a bit. I just think in the long term, I never use the flop actually. I buy PhD Flopper so I can use explosive weapons, not so I can actually go around flopping. And this isn't an official perk, but I actually think it's one of the best examples of doing a quote-unquote PhD flopper right, so I want to bring it up. That being Banana Colada, an extremely popular community-made perk in a lot of modded maps, which essentially took advantage of the fact you could no longer dolphin dive in Black Ops 3, and instead you could only slide around, and decided to make Banana Colada, a perk that would make it so that when you slid, you would leave behind a slippery banana slick, which would make zombies fall over, trip, and take damage, which was not only really, really powerful, but also, because of the fact it was so slippery, it would make your slide go much further and much faster. And because already sliding was faster than running in Black Ops 3, it made sliding extremely good for mobility. So there was good reason to take Banana Colada, even if you never actually planned to use the banana slip. You could just take Banana Colada for the insane speed boost while using slide movement, which was obviously more than worth it. I mean, people take Staminup, don't they? Why wouldn't they take Banana Colada? So enough about perks that actually function, what about Blaze Phase? What does Blaze Phase do wrong? Well, to start, Blaze Phase does provide you a new attack, and that's it. Like, no extra benefits. There's no explosion immunity, there's no fall damage immunity, there's no movement improvement or anything like that. It's just a new attack you just have on your body. Okay, but is it the attack at least good? Well, good is a subjective word, but I would say no. Basically, you crouch, and you get this annoying and obnoxious fire effect. This little... And yeah, it's really annoying that you hear it every single time you crouch, even if you don't want to use Blaze Phase, but yeah, that exists. So I'm not going to lie, it took me ages to even figure out how to even use the Blaze Phase attack back when I first started playing Black Ops 4, because of the fact that I thought, considering it was a dash attack, that what you had to do was crouch to charge it up, and then sprint to release it, since sprinting already forces you to uncrouch, and, you know, it's a sprint. But no. Already, I think the controls here are completely screwed, because the way you actually activate Blaze Phase is that you tap B to crouch, I mean, assuming you're on an Xbox controller. I'm playing on PC now, but I was playing on Xbox back in the day, and then you tap B again to shoot forwards, and you stand up automatically at the same time. Listen, now that I get it, I at least know how to do it consistently, but that just feels so wrong from a basic controls perspective. If I have a dash ability, why the hell would it be activated by pressing crouch and not sprint? Now, from there, I can give some credit to Blaze Phase. Basically, every zombie you run through gets immediately obliterated. And the dash does go a respectable distance, not super far. I don't think it's actually faster to use Blaze Phase for movement. But if you do need to move very suddenly, then certainly it's faster than sprinting, it's just that the crouch charge-up time isn't really great. But from here, you then have to reckon with the fact that this perk has a cooldown for being used that is really long, and you also have to reckon with the fact that you cannot steer your movement at all once you release. You go in a straight line and you have zero control of your character. Not to mention, the physics feel very janky the moment you enter and the moment you leave Blaze Phase. So sometimes unexpected things can happen that could lead to you dying immediately after using it. Basically, the only saving grace of this perk is, I will admit, there is one thing I like about Blaze Phase. I can't believe I'm even admitting that. That is that if you find yourself in a corner and you have your shield, if you crouch in the corner with Blaze Phase and hold up your shield, you can charge it up safely, and even if you're completely surrounded on all sides by zombies, and by all means should be fucked, you don't have your specialist, you don't have anything, you just have your shield, which is about to break, and your Blaze Phase. You can use the shield as a meat shield and let it break, just so you can charge up your Blaze Phase and Blaze Phase out of there. And I will admit, not a lot of things could save you there that are perks. The only reason I just don't think that's a big deal is Anywhere But Here exists, and I would much rather just run Anywhere But Here, a classic elixir that everyone's going to be running realistically anyway, rather than waste a perk slot. And that's also assuming that Blaze Phase isn't on cooldown and that you have enough time to charge at the Blaze Phase while holding up your shield, and there is a corner that's tight enough that zombies can't sneak around the side of your shield while holding it up. Or you've got to be using Victorious Tortoise to get around that, but if you're using Victorious Tortoise, that's already so good, you don't need Blaze Phase. Yeah, you can see this perk just sucks. Now, all that said, I was a little bit worried, because just before I made this video, I realized, wait, I don't even know what the modifier effect for Blaze Phase is. Oh god, I need to check what it is, it might actually be good. And the modifier effect was interesting. The modifier effect makes it so that Blaze Phase doesn't have a distance limit. The dash will just continue until it hits an object. Now remember, the dash, you still can't steer it, so it's just a straight line. But in theory, you could go much further with it. And I had to sit down and think, oh damn, wait, does that actually change things? Because if I could find a stretch of straight ground that was long enough that you actually could run faster by using Blaze Phase than just running around normally, maybe Blaze Phase could have some real utility as a movement perk. Thankfully for me, I don't have to change any of my opinions, because not only are there very few areas in Zombies maps where you can just run in a straight line for an extremely long time with no issues, but in the few areas that do have a decent amount of straight line space, yeah, it really doesn't compensate for the charge-up time. It's still awful as a movement perk. Not to mention, Blaze Phase is already weirdly overpriced, and putting it in the modifier slot makes it even more overpriced. So yeah, garbage perk, F tier, please delete from the game, why was it ever made? Next up is Electric Burst, or let's be real, Electric Cherry. I will say, for as much as I'm going to defend Black Ops 4 on some things, I will not defend this game for renaming perks that sounded way better in the previous games, and just giving them dumb names like this. So we're just calling it Electric Cherry. Anyway, Electric Cherry in this game is the same as it's ever been, bar one thing. And that one thing, weirdly enough, puts it in S tier. I want to clarify, without this one thing, I genuinely think Electric Cherry is probably like C. It's very fun and convenient to have, but probably not the best. So, as a reminder for those of you who don't know, but I think most of you do, Electric Cherry was a perk introduced in Mob of the Dead in Black Ops 2, and essentially made it so that when you went to reload your weapon, you would get this electric charge around you that would electrocute zombies for being near you. They had to be really close to you, but if you hit them with the electric charge, you would stun them and deal some damage to them. The damage wasn't usually that good, but the stun was very good. And so it was mostly so that you could get some breathing room to stop and reload. If you cancelled your reload, you wouldn't be able to summon the electricity again until you did the reload properly, so you couldn't abuse this to infinite stun zombies. And as well as that, the game would see how much percentage of your magazine you'd emptied before you went to reload, and made it so the stun power would be weaker if you used less of your clip before reloading. Meaning, of course, that Electric Cherry was best with weapons that ran out of bullets in the clip and had to reload really frequently, because then you would get extremely frequent stuns for maximum damage and maximum duration. Of course, because this game has no speed cola, it's just an inherent part of the game, that does mean that Electric Cherry is kind of nice in that it's the only perk in the game that makes it easier to reload for the most part, because of the fact that you don't have speed cola. But it kind of goes both ways. The fact that you don't have to buy speed cola because you just have it means that it's also less necessary to take a perk that makes it easier to reload. So as nice as it is to have Electric Cherry, I think on its own, it's not that great. Until you look at the modifier effect. And I'm not going to lie, I don't like it, but I can't ignore the fact it's really good. The modifier effect is essentially, when you reload your weapon, you get this charge built up, where it's released the next time you go to melee a zombie, and the next zombie you melee gets electrocuted, insta-killing them, and also sometimes jumping to a couple nearby zombies, also stunning or insta-killing them. The second you kill your first zombie with this melee, a timer will start, and once the timer runs out, you will lose the ability to keep electrocuting zombies. As well as that, the timer will be longer or shorter, once again, based on how much of your clip you emptied before you reloaded. So everything I'm saying so far might sound like, yeah, it has potential to be strong, especially if that electrocution kills forever, but why would it be as OP as this? Literally S tier for a perk that otherwise would probably be like C tier. Well, beyond the obvious that this is cheese that you can use to camp in a corner forever to reach round infinity on Targda, Totem, or Alpha Omega, I don't believe it works on the Chaos maps thanks to the Catalyst zombies, as well as the fact that I think that mini-boss zombies can interfere with this, and obviously there's a lot of mini-bosses on the other maps. But certainly on any Ether story maps, you can absolutely destroy the game with this effect. And it's mostly down to its synergy with just one weapon, the Ballistic Knife. A weapon that's otherwise kind of a meme because of the fact that it's literally just your knife, but you shoot it. But of course, a lot of people also know that the Ballistic Knife is one of the few weapons in the game where you can actually pick your knives back up to reload your Ballistic Knife rather than having to run out of bullets. As well as that, you technically only get one knife in a clip and then have to reload, and it's a really quick reload. Do you see where this is going? If you run the Ballistic Knife, which by the way is one of the lightest weapons in the game as well, so you'll be able to run really fast with it, but when you're running the Ballistic Knife, you're not only going to be able to run around super fast, you're not only going to be able to one-hit kill electrocute zombies by just running up to them and stabbing them, and you also get to stab them faster with a Ballistic Knife than a normal knife as well, but on top of all that, whenever this electric charge ability runs out, you just need to reload. And you're using a gun that reloads almost immediately, that has infinite bullets so long as you keep picking them back up. And did I mention yet, this electrocution ability has no cooldown. The only wait time is the whole needing to reload. So if you have a fast reloading weapon that empties its entire clip in one shot and has infinite ammo and already is made to be a melee weapon, you essentially just have turned the Ballistic Knife into a wonder weapon all of a sudden that will just destroy everything on the map forever. And hell, I said that this strat doesn't work as well on mini-bosses just because of the fact it doesn't insta-kill them. But even then, it still does significant damage to them, and as well as that, stuns them for a stupidly long duration. So long as you don't get interrupted, you can just solo Blightfathers with nothing but the Ballistic Knife by abusing this. You can just stand there and wail on them and they will just shake in place and hide and cry. The only reason it can be an issue is because, of course, you're probably dealing with other threats besides the Blightfather, and if you don't keep hitting it, it will eventually come out of its stun and get a chance to hit you. which of course is a bit sketchy. Combine that with the fact it does take a really long time to kill these things, even if they are stun locked this whole time, and you can see the issue. Still, no matter what, unfortunately, as much as it feels weird, as much as this is kind of a cheese, Electric Cherry's got to go in S. I think I'd be being dishonest if I presented it any other way.
Hey, I'm just going to add this section in post pretty quickly. There are a couple things I forgot to mention in the initial recording, and this is probably the biggest one, the stuff I forgot to mention about Electric Cherry. So first things first, I forgot to tie this back to Ethereal Razor, because basically the entirety of Ethereal Razor's placement is based on the existence of Electric Cherry's modifier effect, as weird as that feels to say. This is why I kind of alluded to earlier that, honestly, Ethereal Razor was probably the single hardest perk on this list to rank, because of the fact that by all means, on its own merits, it is an E tier, potentially even F tier perk. It might be fun to play around with, but the slight damage boost, lifesteal, and AoE hits are absolutely not worth the price, nor a perk slot. And it's definitely one of the worst pulls you can possibly get whenever you get a random perk. So by default, on its own merits, it would be an E tier. But then you've got to introduce the modifier effect, which makes it so that you can one-knife kill people forever with lunges. Now, if that was where the story ended, maybe I could even bump Ethereal Razor all the way up to an A, maybe if we're being ambitious, an S, just because infinite insta-kills that don't require any ammo, as dangerous as they might be to go for, would be pretty highly coveted. The reason why it's not that high, though, is because of the fact that Electric Cherry's modifier knocks it back down, because it does the same thing, except you don't need to do the dangerous lunge animation, and you actually get a good perk with it. You just have to reload to activate the insta-kills. But again, if you're using the ballistic knife, which you want to use anyway for the faster melees and the extra melee damage, then yeah, you can just get infinite reloads without spending ammo, and your reloads are so fast that it's basically not even a downside. Not to mention, you can use the stun to make going for melees more safe, and you can basically use the stun whenever you like on command at full power using the ballistic knife. It's just not even close. Electric Cherry clears in this category and is a way better melee perk than the perk that exists to be nothing but a melee perk. So shouldn't it go back down to E then, if the one thing that could make it good, Electric Cherry literally just does better? Especially because both of them are required to be in the modifier slot to reach their full potential, and you can't have two perks in that slot. Well, this is the one redeeming feature of Ethereal Razor. That being that it is actually relatively wise to run it specifically if you have Electric Cherry in your modifier slot. And you might be thinking, well, why do you need it anymore? The main thing was the insta-kill melees, and you have that with or without it. But it mostly comes down to just one thing. On high rounds, it doesn't matter how careful you try and play it, if your main method of actually killing zombies is going to be melees, that is extremely sketchy, especially on hardcore with 3-hit downs. And probably the number one way you're going to get screwed is if you're trying to do a normal knife swipe, but the game locks you into a lunge, which locks out your movement and forces you inside a horde. Then you probably get hit 3 times at once before you can even respond. In that case, you'll probably take 3 consecutive hits immediately and down from effectively full HP within the space of less than 1/10 of a second. So a combination of the AoE synergizing with the insta-kill effect from Electric Cherry's modifier, and the fact that the lifesteal can get you to clutch and bail out of situations where you might have died otherwise with that 1 extra hit when you accidentally get locked into a lunge, means I do think it's probably worth it to run Ethereal Razor with Electric Cherry in the modifier slot. It does suck that you're using 2 perk slots to do your melee strategy, but ultimately the power of it definitely compensates. That's the majority of what I wanted to say, but a couple other things I'd like to add in as well. For one, I'd just generally like to say, for as much as I actually do find the effect really cool, I'm just kind of sad it's on Electric Cherry. I get why, because the time that you have to use the insta-kill uses the same system you get where the power you get of your stun when you reload depends on how many bullets you've unloaded. It's the same thing here, where the more of your clip that you used when you went to reload, at maximum the whole clip of course, the longer you get to do the insta-kill melees. Which is just another reason why the ballistic knife is a must-have here, since it only has 1 shot in the clip. And to be fair, I'll give him credit where it's due. The electrocution stun effect on reload with Electric Cherry does have some synergy with a melee build because of the fact that the stuns make it safer to go in for a kill on a zombie, and the stuns themselves are very close range. It's just most people who buy Electric Cherry don't do it to do a melee build. They do it to reload more safely. And it feels kind of weird that the entire purpose of this perk is just flipped on its head the second you put it in the modifier slot. I'm not a big fan of that, honestly. This feels like the kind of thing that should have been its own perk. But speaking of the actual base perk, you might be wondering if I think the base perk of Electric Cherry without the modifier is good. But I have to say, actually no. I think it might be a low C. I will say I do find Electric Cherry extremely fun and satisfying to use, and it's definitely one I like to use casually, but if I'm actually pushing myself, I think it's kind of a beginner trap. You'd think the fact that now Speed Cola is just part of the game would help Electric Cherry, considering the main thing that held it back in previous games was that you often didn't have enough perk slots to run both Electric Cherry and Speed Cola. And out of the two, in 99% of situations, Speed Cola would be better for safer reloads than Electric Cherry. Even if both perks were pretty good perks, they both did such similar things and one of them just did it better. So Electric Cherry kind of just lost out every time. Now that you don't have to pick between the two, you might have thought that would help Electric Cherry, but honestly, it kind of doesn't. Just generally, most good weapons in Black Ops 4 reload fast. They don't need Electric Cherry and Speed Cola. The only things that even arguably do are LMGs, and that would usually be a big point in Electric Cherry's favor because in almost every zombies game, LMGs are the best non-wonder weapons in the game. I mean, some people like to bring up the RPK, and the RPK is good, don't get me wrong, but I think that's nothing compared to things like the Dingo in Black Ops 3, or God forbid even, holy shit, the MG in World at War. That thing is like a wonder weapon in disguise. But unfortunately, Black Ops 4 is quite possibly the only zombies game I can think of where LMGs are really underwhelming. I mean, I say that. They're not garbage. I would say that your average LMG in this game is still probably marginally better than your average weapon from the entire weapon pool. But we're used to, if you get an LMG, you're popping the fuck off in a lot of the other games. But when you get an LMG in Black Ops 4, it's like, oh, well, that'll do. If the LMGs actually were the kings of the game, like in the past, then Electric Cherry might have had a better shot as a base perk. But yeah, I don't think the base perk is very good, and if it weren't for the modifier, I do think it would be going low C. The modifier shoots it up to S, though. With that long interjection out of the way, on to the next perk in the list.
Next up is Dying Wish. Oh my god. I don't think you guys are ready for this hot take. Dying Wish, B tier, below Quick Revive. So, don't get me wrong, I like running Dying Wish, and if you're playing Black Ops 4 casually, don't stop running Dying Wish. But, okay, I admit this is a problem with Black Ops 4, but very much a lot of Black Ops 4 is about getting into a rhythm with your bailouts. You know, you've got so many get out of jail free mechanics that the main skill in a lot of Black Ops 4 games is learning how to juggle them all so that you always have one available, even if any one mechanic that you have that could save yourself isn't going to be on deck all the time. Now, Dying Wish is a bailout mechanic. It makes it so when you're supposed to die, if you have this perk, instead you remain at 1 health with 6 seconds of invincibility. Once it runs out, your health starts regenerating and the invincibility is lifted. But that does mean there is a brief moment where you're at literally 1 HP, so you need to be careful. It is an expensive perk as a result, but it does have a very big downside attached to it, which I think a decent amount of people know, but maybe not everyone. The cooldown for Dying Wish isn't a set timer. I think it starts at 90 seconds by default, but it gets longer every single time you need to use it. Exponentially longer. So the more and more you need to use Dying Wish, the less and less it will help you. Now don't get me wrong, if you're playing casual games of BO4, there's going to be plenty of times where you just don't hit your specialist fast enough. Or maybe you could have gotten out of this situation easily, but you just didn't react quick enough. And Dying Wish is going to save you when nothing else would have, because it wasn't a resource issue, it was literally just a reaction time issue. And I'm not even saying that to be like a lol skill issue. I mean, I like using Dying Wish when I'm not like proper locking in for a game, because, you know, I'm not literally hard focusing every single game and try-harding and sweating my brains out. I'm just playing the game sometimes, and if I'm playing like that, I usually like to run Dying Wish. But essentially, this is going to be my argument. If specialist weapons are bailouts that also double as amazing ways to kill zombies, that recharge super fast at base already, and the only issue is that they're not always available often enough, why is Dying Wish better than Timeslip? Because in theory, if you just always hit the button in time to bail yourself out, be it with equipment or with your specialist weapon, I can guarantee you will get more, like, saved life situations out of Timeslip in a single game than Dying Wish. That is just mathematically true. Because the effect of Timeslip doesn't get any weaker the longer the game goes on. You still get that accelerated bailout potential at all moments. Whereas Dying Wish is slowly losing ground every second the game continues. Either you're doing well enough that you're not getting killed, in which case you're not even using this perk, or you're getting killed and all you're doing is buying time. You know? Ultimately, Timeslip is actually a permanent solution to the problem, it just requires you to have some fast reactions. And Dying Wish just buys time. And again, you know, not every game needs to go on forever, and if you're not going to be playing games that go on forever and you're not pushing the limits of how far you can go, Dying Wish is way more convenient and much more fun to play with. But, yeah, I think what I said still stands. Ultimately, you're really going to be using Timeslip if you're trying to really push yourself and see how far you can go, and I think that Dying Wish ends up kind of being a waste of a perk slot if you're really pushing things. I think it could only be good if you could find a map where the burst damage is so ridiculous that even if you were really on the ball with your Timeslips and your your equipment and your specialist weapon, that the Dying Wish would still be needed just because of situations where you couldn't even possibly humanly react, but that's definitely pushing the boundaries of what's realistic. Next up is Stone Cold Stronghold, a weird perk in that I think this is the only perk that's ever been made specifically to encourage camping. Something that usually the developers discourage us from, but I guess they just had a change of heart in this game. Either way, Stone Cold Stronghold is a B tier perk. Below Dying Wish, though. Stone Cold Stronghold is a bit of a weird one for me to formulate an opinion on. Essentially what it does is if you stand still long enough, a glowing circle appears around you. And so long as you don't leave the circle, you get a few benefits. You slowly generate armor for being in the circle that can take hits for you instead of your health bar, which might sound really good, and it is, except for the part where the armor you get is absolutely minuscule, and it takes forever to even get enough armor to constitute one hit's worth of protection. That doesn't mean it's not worth it at all, it is free just for standing still in fairness, but I just want to make it clear that you're not going to be tanking a lot of hits by doing this. The other benefit that it provides is that you slowly get increased damage the longer you stand in the circle towards all of your weapons, which is a really, really convenient benefit, but I'm pretty convinced there's a limit, which would make sense. I don't think it keeps scaling forever, otherwise this could get ridiculously strong. The base Stone Cold Stronghold is probably a C tier perk, but I definitely think its modifier improves it quite a bit, although still I don't think it's the best perk in the world with the modifier. The modifier makes it so that you can also get increased damage and armor from getting kills while in the circle to accelerate the process of building up damage boosts and armor, rather than just having to stand around waiting to get it at an extremely slow pace. This definitely is a big upgrade to the perk, but ultimately there are a lot of things that want the modifier slot, and just getting faster armor and damage boosts isn't a bad effect, but it might not be the best. Again, there is a lot of stuff you might want in that modifier slot for a camping strategy. At the very least, Stone Cold Stronghold is surprisingly cheap for the power it provides, and I did mention that camping is actually pretty good in this game when in previous games it's usually not the strat, so I've got to give it that. I think B tier is pretty appropriate here. Next up is Victorious Tortoise, my beloved. I love this perk, and I am putting it way in S tier. I can't believe I'm saying this honestly, but I feel like people don't understand how good this perk is. Like, maybe they do, but no one talks about it. Maybe it's just because it's a Black Ops 4 perk, I don't know. But I might even say, and I don't know, maybe I'm crazy here, this perk might be more OP than Juggernog is. It is actually insane. So I should stop the preamble here, because honestly, decent amount of you, maybe you don't even know what this perk does. Victorious Tortoise is a pretty rarely used perk from what I've seen, even though it's super good. In Black Ops 4, that is weird, because it only applies to your shield, and I think this is the big turnoff for a lot of people, especially because you might not memorize all the part locations if you're a more casual player, and you might not always get the shield every game. But if you do get the shield every game, this perk is amazing. You see, the shield can take something in the ballpark of 25 hits off the top of my head, I might be wrong there, it could take a lot of hits, it takes forever to break. And of course, usually when you have a shield and you're not using it, it protects your back, and when you pull it out, it protects your front, but you're now vulnerable from the back. Now, what Victorious Tortoise does is first of all make it so that you are just literally invincible when you pull out the shield until it breaks. As long as you're physically holding it in your hands right now, you literally just have invincibility until the shield gives out. So yeah, being able to carry around a guaranteed instant invincibility token that you can immediately buy back when you lose it is already insane for a perk like this. Especially considering the guns that come bundled with your shields actually scale their damage based on how far through the game you are, so that they're still useful even in the late game. But then there is just one obvious problem with this. What if you get into a situation where you get surrounded on all sides, you pull out your shield, and sure, it saves you for like all of 5 seconds, but like, the zombies are just too tanky. The round is too high, there's no escape route, you're just buying time here. You're just sitting in a corner holding up your shield, and sure, you're not dying yet, but the shield's about to break, and you don't have an escape route, and you physically cannot kill the zombies fast enough to escape this. Well, you know what happens then? Victorious Tortoise has one more ability up its sleeve, one that I thought didn't sound that great at first, until I actually saw it in action. When the shield breaks, it explodes. Now, that on its own would already be like, okay, yeah, I get that, that's slightly better, but if that's just a little bit of damage, you know, it's a nice little small benefit, but not that great. But, first of all, not only does this explosion do so much damage that it insta-kills zombies in difficulties below hardcore forever because of the health cap, but even in hardcore, where zombies can eventually finally get health pools high enough where they don't get insta-killed by the shield explosion, it still stuns every zombie it hits and knocks them onto the floor, allowing you to run right over them. So even if it doesn't kill all the zombies with the explosion, which you'd have to be on a really high round on hardcore difficulty for that to be the case, you could still just run right through the horde while they're on the floor and get to safety by the time they stand up. So yeah, having this perk combined with a shield is basically just always having the one key on your keyboard be a "I don't want to die today" button. The only thing that I can say bad about Victorious Tortoise is the fact that yes, I must admit, the modifier effect does suck. The modifier effect simply makes shield bashing more effective against mini-boss enemies, and I don't recommend shield bashing in the first place. Your shield health is extremely valuable, and you cannot shield bash zombies without losing shield health. And since I just mentioned all the shields in this game come with guns attached that actually do good damage, it's much more smart if you need to attack zombies while holding up the shield to use the gun than to use the shield bash, even in close quarters. But aside from the modifier being underwhelming, Victorious Tortoise is nothing but good news all the way through. It's a cheap perk, honestly, for the effect it provides at only 2,500 points. And even the fact that its modifier is bad can kind of be spun into a positive, in that there are a lot of really, really powerful modifiers in the running that make it really hard to choose what to put in that slot. But Victorious Tortoise, you always know it doesn't need that slot. You can save that for another perk in your loadout. So yeah, I think it's clear enough by now. I love Victorious Tortoise. I think it's an insanely underrated perk. I think it's probably the best perk in the game. I think nothing's going to go above it.
This is just another quick interjection. This one will be much shorter. Earlier when I was saying that Quick Revive is outclassed by another perk that kind of knocks it down, it is Victorious Tortoise, which might sound a bit weird at first considering they do very different things, but long story short, if you ever need to regenerate health, all you need to do is pull out your shield with Victorious Tortoise. Because you are invincible, even if the health regeneration takes a little bit longer to kick in, you can just guarantee your health will regenerate unless your shield breaks. But it takes so long to break that unless you've been doing a terrible job of keeping it alive, you'll be fine. The only thing you really get out of running both Quick Revive and Victorious Tortoise is that you can save on a little bit of shield health by having the health regeneration kick in sooner using Quick Revive. And that isn't necessarily nothing considering just how insanely OP shields are once you have Victorious Tortoise. But I'm not gonna lie, unless you're really spamming shields so much that you're actually going to run out of points to keep buying more shields, you'd honestly just buy another shield if you need one. And just doing that saves you a perk slot so you don't have to run Quick Revive. I'm not saying this as someone who actually wants Quick Revive to be lower on the tier list. I think I've made it clear already. I love Quick Revive, and I think in a fairer game format, Quick Revive would be A or S tier. Unfortunately, as I say, it's just in this game with the problems that it has, as well as the fact that Victorious Tortoise exists, yeah, I'm usually picking Victorious Tortoise over Quick Revive.
Well, anyway, next up is Deadshot Dealer. Now, let's be real. This is Deadshot Daiquiri, and this is supposed to be black, not yellow. Okay. This one, I don't feel the need to explain that much. Yeah, Deadshot is literally just your hipfire spread is reduced. Again, on console, it does make it so that auto-aim, like aim assist, will aim for the head rather than the chest, which is nice, but we're not on console. At least I'm not on console anymore. I'm on PC, so it's not a really big effect. Now, in fairness, I do think people sometimes underrate the value of reduced hip fire. I think that actually can be a pretty big deal depending on the weapon. Funnily enough, for the longest time, I never understood why Mob of the Dead had less perks than almost every single other map, like since Black Ops 1. There's only 5 perks on Mob of the Dead, if you never noticed. And one of them is Deadshot, and I always thought, why'd they put Deadshot on this map? But in hindsight, I'm realizing I got a run of like Mob of the Dead where I had the ray gun and the blundergat, and I realized, hang on a minute, wait, I actually don't want double tap because both of these are wonder weapons that won't get buffed by double tap, and the only other perk I can take is Deadshot. Is it worth taking Deadshot? And I realized, wait, hang on, it actually is, because the blundergat can't shoot straight for shit. And I mean, it is a shotgun, so it's not too bad, but like, it would be a lot better if it could shoot straight, and Deadshot actually helps with that. So I'm not saying that Deadshot can't be helpful, it's just, with all that said, there is no disputing the fact that Deadshot's use cases are very narrow. And that's fine if you're just spending 1,500 points on it. Again, if you could just spend 1,500 points on Deadshot and that's that, Deadshot would be an absolutely fine perk. The problem is it takes up a perk slot. That's really just it. Just like, why? You know, you're not wasting a perk slot on something this garbage. But I really do think it's at least better than Blazeface. There are weapons where it can be really important to not have to ADS if they have a really long ADS time, or if they're really heavy or something like that. And to be honest, it is surprising just how much safer it is to shoot with hipfire while training compared to trying to ADS. But of course you always have to ADS because of the fact you don't want to waste bullets, and if you're in a situation where ammo is low, then you can't really be hip firing. But if your hip fire is just so accurate, there you go, Deadshot Dealer is going to be really good. Honestly, I was really rooting for Deadshot to be surprisingly good in this game. I hadn't actually given it a chance yet, so I wanted to play it with a modifier effect. All this perk needed to be good was a modifier effect that actually improved the damage output of the perk. And I thought that's what we were going to get, and we kind of got it, but we kind of didn't. The modifier effect for Deadshot is that whenever you land multiple consecutive headshots in a row, you get a slowly building headshot damage multiplier increase, which is a nice effect, except for the point where you can miss one headshot and lose it all. Now, maybe with snipers that's like, okay, but like, you've seen what average zombies gameplay looks like. It is way too fast and hectic for consistent headshots without missing a single one to be realistic. And so keeping this damage multiplier up is just not gonna happen without the amount of effort required to keep it up, honestly putting you in more danger than just not having the perk in the first place. In other words, if you have the skill to actually consistently land headshots without interruption so that you can actually get the bonus from this perk, then you don't even need the damage bonus from this perk in the first place. You're already playing well enough that you probably don't really need the extra output. Next up is Bandolier Bandit, which I think I am going to place right here in B tier. Bandolier Bandit is weirdly simple. It almost feels like a perk that should have existed years ago. It literally just does one thing. It gives you more ammo. That's it. Every gun you take just has more bullets in it now. Now, of course, it does have a modifier effect, but it feels kind of different. Modifier effect is a sort of phantom reload. No, not that phantom reload, not the elixir that no one uses. Basically, whenever you stow a weapon away and decide to stop using it for a bit, while you have it stowed away, it will slowly regenerate bullets in the magazine on a percentage-based basis, not a one bullet at a time basis, obviously just to compensate for different clip sizes. And so when you swap back to the weapon, depending on how long you've waited, it might have reloaded 3/4 of the magazine without you even having to stop to reload, just by you putting the gun away. This modifier is a bit of a weird one, in that I think it's kind of powerful, but kind of not at the same time. No one really uses it from what I've seen, and I can understand that, even though I do think it has potential to be underrated. Long story short, if you can actually find a pair of weapons that you actually want to be using where the reload is a massive issue with the weapon, even with the speed collar effect, and it wouldn't have been fixed by just putting Electric Cherry on, then yes, Bandolier Bandit in the modifier slot is really powerful. The main way that I kind of tested this was running a camping strat and Voyage of Despair, where I would combine the Kraken with an LMG. And in that strat, Bandolier Bandit in the modifier slot felt great.
One last quick interjection here, just to say I cut out a bit here where I was talking about Bandolier Bandit's modifier, because of the fact that I was bringing up the whole there's nothing good to reload in this game argument. And I mean, I already kind of covered that with the little bit I had to edit in for Electric Cherry, and I said it shorter in that one anyway than I did in this first recording, so I thought I might as well just cut this bit out. But let's cut this back in wherever's most appropriate.
I hope you see what I mean. I think that there's potential for this effect, but ultimately I have to talk about what I see in the game, and it's like, this could be really good if there was anything I could use it on, but realistically everything I could use this on is not worth the perk slot. Next up is Winter's Wail. And I will say, when it came to changing this list for the sake of covering hardcore difficulty compared to normal difficulty, most things only move maybe one tier. In fact, most things didn't even really move much. But this perk may be the only one that leaped up to the top. And that might catch you off guard. But I'm not gonna lie, I think Winter's Wail is the second best perk in Black Ops 4 for realistic... Let me try that again. For hardcore difficulty. I keep doing that by accident. This is essentially this game's version of Widow's Wine. Essentially, it gets 3 charges that all have their own cooldowns that recharge over time when they're gone. And essentially, when you get hit, as long as it's not the first time you've been hit, as long as you already had health missing and then you get hit again, it will unleash a blast of ice. And that blast of ice will freeze all the zombies nearby to you when you get hit, making it really easy to just run out of there safely and wail on them. And the freeze lasts a while too. And while this effect does have a cooldown, the fact that you can store up to 3 charges, or 4 if you put it in the modifier slot, combined with the fact that recharging it is just purely time-based with no caveats, means that so long as you play it sensible whenever you start running low on charges, you can really hoard these charges and save them for when you really need them, so that you will always have Winter's Wail charges ready for when things go wrong. And again, the freeze effect is just so strong and hits so many zombies around you whenever it triggers that it's just an instant bailout a lot of the time, so long as you have the damage to get out. Now, the thing is, you might think that Winter's Wail would be worse on realistic difficulty, like I did initially, because of the fact that Winter's Wail would only activate on the second hit, and it's 3 hit downs. At least in normal, you have another 3 hits left once it's able to be activated. At least in normal, you would have 2 hits worth of health left by the time the first activation went off. But in hard difficulty, you would only have 1 hit left in your health bar by the time you actually trigger the ability of Winter's Wail. And you might think that would be a bad thing, but weirdly enough, it kind of makes the perk better. You see, the whole reason I kind of don't like Winter's Wail on normal difficulty is because, to be frank, it is really hard to keep charges. Especially because on normal difficulty you can get away with a lot more, you do play it a lot more fast and loose, and as a result, you do naturally take a lot of hits that you just know you won't die from. But it's still annoying constantly losing charges of Winter's Wail. Not to mention, having more health means you waste charges faster, because you can take more hits in a smaller amount of time and not die, which means you lose charges faster, which is the last thing you want. You want to save and spare these charges as much as possible. And so honestly, the perfect way to use this perk is to have it only activate once. And the only situation in which it will activate more than once is if you actually went and died. That way you can't actually be wasting charges when you don't need them, because you literally need the charges in the only situation they can go off. The only time they'll go off is when you're 1 hit to death. As well as that, just generally, sometimes in normal difficulty, on a short notice, it can be a bit difficult to tell if you actually need to hit your buttons and bail out as fast as possible when Winter's Wail triggers. I mean, if you take 2 hits in normal, you still got half your health bar left. Maybe you don't need to hit your specialist. And maybe you look around and see, yeah, I don't know how I got hit twice, but it looks like everything's fine, so I think I'm just going to try and run out of here. And maybe then you die very suddenly because of something you didn't see happening, which actually caused you to lose your Winter's Wail in the first place. But in hardcore, it's instant. In hardcore, the second you see Winter's Wail go off, it immediately tells you, hey, you're 1 HP. And I know this sounds really small, but just having that immediate, no questions asked, hey, this is your warning sign that you're 1 HP, don't worry, we've frozen all the zombies, go ahead and use whatever you gotta use to stay alive. So much better. So much better having no uncertainty about it when you have to make these split-second decisions, where it's just, you hear Winter's Wail, you hit the button for your specialist, you hit the button for your anywhere but here, you hit the button for your homunculus, whatever it might be, and you go. Every single time I am playing realistic difficulty, it is basically required that I am running Victorious Tortoise and Winter's Wail. And I think, to be fair, this might be some of the reason why some people haven't been able to really get into realistic difficulty, because I think without Victorious Tortoise or Winter's Wail, I feel like realistic realistic difficulty probably would be pretty tilting. I think the only thing that could probably stop you from tilting in it would be Dying Wish, but of course I mentioned Dying Wish is going to get exponentially worse the longer you have to rely on it. Whereas Victorious Tortoise, Winter's Wails, Timeslip, all of these perks are going to stay just as good as they were on round 1 in round 100. Maybe even, they might even get better. Next up is Mule Kick. Mule Kick, most of you know, but just lets you have a third weapon. And, of course, it has a modifier effect in this game, which is actually pretty nice. It's 2 things. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know the second thing existed until recently, because I already read the effect, and I never remembered seeing this, but I guess I just must have skipped over it when I first read it. The effect that I did know is that when you have it in the modifier slot, of course, as many of you know, you actually lose your third weapon forever when you die with Mule Kick in normal games. Even if you buy Mule Kick back, you get your third weapon slot back, but the weapon that used to be in it is still gone forever. Whereas if you put Mule Kick in the modifier slot, it will actually remember what your final weapon was, and the second you buy Mule Kick back, you will get your weapon back, so it won't be gone. That alone is a very casual, friendly, and pretty fun little modifier effect, but the other effect is honestly potentially the bigger deal. That being that it actually allows you to swap weapons faster, which, bearing in mind that some of the biggest, most powerful weapons in the game tend to be the heaviest and the ones with the longest pull-out animations that cause you to die the most often, swapping weapons faster is actually a pretty big deal. As a result, I'm putting Mule Kick just above Bandolier Bandit. I like to put these both in the same spot, because I think one of the biggest uses of both of these perks is just to have more ammo. Sometimes, you know, ammo just really is a big concern in this game, and having more of it with Bandolier Bandit or Mule Kick is really nice. Obviously with Mule Kick, it's not that you're getting more ammo in each gun, it's that you're just holding a third gun with another set of ammo. But let me talk about why Mule Kick is better than Bandolier Bandit. Even though I must admit, my preference is usually Bandolier Bandit out of pure convenience, I think if I'm actually objectively ranking these, I have to say Mule Kick is better. First of all, I've already covered the fact that Bandolier Bandit's modifier effect, I think, is pretty niche, even though it has a lot of potential to be strong. And so as a result, Mule Kick's is definitely better, even if you don't necessarily need the safety net if you play well, or just make sure your Mule Kick gun isn't one that you're too mortified if you lose it. You still probably want the modifier effect just for the faster weapon swap. But beyond that, I honestly think you probably get a better ammo boost from using Mule Kick than Bandolier Bandit, which is kind of ironic considering Bandolier Bandit exists to be nothing but an ammo boost. I don't remember for sure, but I think the ammo boost of Bandolier Bandit is around 25%. So it's actually not a whole lot of extra ammo. Enough that it matters, but not a whole lot. And so as a result, having a third weapon might be the better bet if the goal is just to have the most ammo on you possible. Not to mention the extra flexibility you get from having a third weapon slot. Like, if you wanted to run an LMG and a wonder weapon, but you also needed to have a light weapon to run around with so that you weren't constantly slowed down by your heavy weapons, you could just get a ballistic knife that you never actually planned to use in your third weapon slot for the most part, just so you can swap to it to run around faster while you're waiting for a chance to use your wonder weapon or LMG. The only reasons I tend to prefer using Bandolier Bandit is that in most games you can just get by with 2 weapons. I usually like to just run an assault rifle and a wonder weapon. And while you could get a third one if you like, if you just want to get into the game straight away and you don't want to have a lot of setup, it is more convenient to just use Bandolier Bandit. Not to mention, this might sound small, but to me this is actually the biggest reason why I'm not a big fan of Mule Kick. I can't lie, I'm a big fan of reload cancelling. For those of you who don't know, a lot of the weapons in CoD games actually put the bullets into the gun before the full reload animation has completed. So once the bullets go into the gun, you can just cut off the rest of the wait time to complete the animation by tapping swap weapon twice quickly to pull the weapon back and pull it back out again to cancel your reload. And of course, usually that would mean you don't get the bullets in the chamber because you cancelled it too soon, but if you wait until the bullets are already in the chamber and you're just waiting for the rest of the animation to complete, you can cancel it early so you can shoot faster. It's one of those techs that's really simple, easy, and satisfying to do, and it's just a nice way to add a little bit more skill expression to the game. And so I really love just reload cancelling whenever I can, even if it's not really important to do so. And I'm not going to lie, I don't like that Mule Kick destroys my muscle memory. No matter how hard I try to tell myself I'm using Mule Kick, I've got 3 weapons, not 2. Press swap weapon 3 times, not 2. No matter how much I consciously tell my brain to hit swap weapon 3 times quickly rather than 2 times quickly, I always hit it 2 times quickly, then have to wait for the long pull-out animation of whatever big, heavy, fuck-off weapon I pulled out by accident, and then maybe die because of it. But I do recognize that it's a simple skill issue, and so that doesn't mean I'm going to put Mule Kick lower. That's just why I personally don't like to go for it, but I understand the appeal. Next up is PhD Slider. This is a tough one, actually. So normally this would just be top of S. Like, as much as I'd hate to do it, I would have to say this is the best weapon in the game, because, sorry, not the best weapon, the best perk in the game, because the best weapon in the game is the Helian Salvo, the rocket launcher that insta-kills forever on normal difficulty, is stupid OP, makes the game a joke, and is basically only usable with PhD slider, so you don't damage yourself when blowing yourself up. But I think I'm putting it a low A. So it's still pretty high. And that's not only because explosive weapons can be pretty strong in this game, but it's also down to the fact that while the Helian Salvo no longer kills forever when you actually play hardcore difficulty and start playing the game properly, it still is quite the powerhouse. It does enough damage to one-shot up to round 41, if I'm correct, and stops on round 42. But even then, not only is that a long time before it stops one-shotting, but on top of that, even once it stops one-shotting, it will still do the stun sort of effect, where all the zombies that survive will be left lying on the floor, and you'll literally just be able to run right over them, while they very, very slowly get back to their feet. So you can still kind of use the Helian Salvo as an instant bailout, it just won't also be killing zombies, at least not without having to shoot twice as much ammo to actually finish the job. As a result, the Helian Salvo is still a beast, and PhD Slider, as a result, is still a very strong perk. It's just no longer going to solo the entire game. And for that reason, you might think that PhD Slider still deserves S tier. I mean, Victorious Tortoise and Winter's Wail still deserve like a top spot, maybe. Maybe they should go above PhD Slider, but maybe like low S, maybe around Electric Cherry's kind of level. But I think you have to realize, once again, PhD Slider is taking up an entire perk slot. And there's a lot of perks you really, really want to be running in some of these games. And you've really got to consider, if the Helian Salvo, yeah, it might be a great bailout mechanic now, but it no longer is going to be your main DPS output. If that's the case, and you're going to be running out of ammo more frequently, so it'd be much, much smarter to use a wall buy instead, where you can just keep buying more ammo if you're about to run out, is it really worth spending an entire perk slot on PhD Slider? Especially because really that's all anyone gets it for the explosive damage immunity. The fall damage immunity is pretty much irrelevant since there isn't really any way you can take significant fall damage in Black Ops 4 maps, they're relatively flat. And the slide attack, do people even remember this exists? Yeah, this is pretty bad. At the very least it does do that knockover thing where you can run over the zombies after you knock them over and they're effectively stunned, but it stops insta-killing very, very early. And yeah, once it stops insta-killing, it runs out its usefulness, especially considering how much danger it puts you in to try and use the attack and how long it takes to recharge. Again, the Helian Salvo is still a beast, just no longer the game-breaking god it was in normal difficulty. And so if PhD Slider, it was once again, if it was just a question of paying the cost to buy it, S tier, absolutely. But again, it's just the fact it takes up a slot, and for something that's no longer soloing the entire game, quite hard to swallow. But that brings us to our final perk, one that some people might not even bother to rank, but I will. Secret Sauce. So Secret Sauce is kind of like the Wonder Fizz in previous games. Secret Sauce will give you a random perk for 1,500. For reference, that's the cheapest price a perk can possibly be. And to clarify, if you get the most expensive perk in the game, it will still only cost 1,500 if you get it on the first hit. So initially, I thought that Secret Sauce sucked, and I didn't understand why so many people ran it. Because I just looked at it and I thought, let me get this straight. Instead of choosing the perks you want to use in the game, you're going to say, let God take the wheel, and the only benefit I'm getting off of this is the fact that I'm paying less points for the perks, but I'm still stuck with whatever the game hands me, and there's a good chance it's garbage and has no synergy with what I'm doing, and the point discounts aren't even that good, and why are you running this perk again? I really wasn't expecting to come around on Secret Sauce, but I forced myself to use it for a bit, and I realized, hang on a minute, I'm seeing it. I'm becoming Secret Sauce pilled. So, first of all, one of the only complaints I will hear out about the Black Ops 4 perk system is the obvious fact that you have to select the perks you want to be using before you even load into the map. Which is not only annoying, A, when you just forget to select the correct loadout, especially if you build a loadout and then you don't remember the fact that it doesn't actually select the loadout that you just built. You have to go and select the loadout in a different menu and then start the map. The amount of times I build a loadout, start a map, and then realize I'm using the loadout from my last game, not the loadout I just built. Yeah, anyway. A lot of people say it sucks that if you change your mind mid-game and realize, you know, early at the start of the game, I really needed this perk. I don't think I need it anymore. I think I'd rather have this perk. You can't change your mind. In previous games, you could actually change your mind, but now, nope, you're locked in. Whether you like it or not, you're using those 4 perks. And I will admit, while I don't think it's game ruining, I do think that kind of sucks. And this is where Secret Source comes in. Because of the fact it grants random perks, and because of the fact you can re-buy it even when you already have it to re-roll whichever random perk you got, you actually are allowed to just keep changing your perks. You just have to make sure that the slot you want to change is set to Secret Source, and you just keep hitting the machine until you get what you want. Now don't get me wrong, I can understand if you look at that and you think, I don't know, that might cost a lot of points. And yeah, it would. But you gotta remember how points work in these games anyway. You get points super fast in the late game, it's just the early game where points matter a lot. So essentially, Secret Source has a bit of a dip in the mid game where it is a little bit worse than actually picking your perks, but I honestly would argue that in most cases it's better late game and better early game. In the early game, you're just needing to get your perks. Honestly, a lot of the times, I don't even need my perks for the effects in the early game. I need my perks to get the reload speed boost from having all 4 perks active at once. So if I just need to buy my 4 perks ASAP, the fact that it gives me a random but discounted perk with Secret Source means I can get my 4 perks way faster than by any other means. So it's good for the early game. But it's good for the late game as well, because of the fact that by the late game, I'll have practically infinite points and could just re-roll every machine until I get the perfect perk loadout. And if at any point I down and I realize that in the new context I am now in, I need a different set of perks, I can just change the perks I have any moment I want. Just keep hitting the machine until I get the different perk I want. You only really have this dip in the middle where you're not at like infinite points territory anymore, but you are at the point where you'd like to have some better perks if you got some bad rolls to start. For that reason, I was genuinely considering S tier for Secret Source. But I think I'm gonna just go shy of that and say high A. Why not S? Just because of one thing. When you down and lose your perks, you've got to get them back. Now already, that's one of the scariest points in a game, is if you down mid-round and need to buy your perks back, and instead of being able to safely sit in your little camping spot, you now have to run across the whole map into multiple death traps just to reach your perks. Now, I'm sure I don't really need to explain why that becomes a lot scarier when you can't just buy the perk from the machine and leave. You have to buy, see what you get, no, that was shit, give me another hit, buy, see what you get, I don't want that, buy, see what you get, okay, the horde is here, I am trapped in this room, please just give me something good, buy, you gave me Blaze Face, fuck you. That is really the only reason it falls short of S tier, is it does make recoveries really hard if Secret Source just decides to screw you and give you garbage perks. But again, if you can just beat the rest of that round and get to the end of it and hold a zombie for that round and then go rebuy all your perks, you're in the clear. And lastly, just in defense of it as well, and justifying why it's an A tier, I would like to point out that, believe it or not, most of the hits you can get off of Secret Source in most cases are pretty good. Like, there's the obvious fact that you could get, like, Victorious Tortoise or Winter's Wail, and that's great. But for the most part, the most kind of bad hits you can get from Secret Source is Ethereal Razor's usually a bad hit, Denge, Blaze Phase is obviously always a bad hit, Death Perception's usually pretty underwhelming, and if you get like something like PhD Slider with no explosive weapons, Stone Cold Stronghold in a strat where you can't camp, or like Mule Kick in a strat where there's no need for a third weapon, that can suck. But like, for the most part, most of these are pretty good. Even these underwhelming ones. Zombshell, obviously not the best perk in the world, but Zombshell early game for literally less than half the cost as your first hit from Secret Source. Not that bad, honestly. Hell, even Deadshot. I've mentioned before, it's not even necessarily that Deadshot's effect is bad, it's just not worth a perk slot. But if it's just temporarily there until you get a better perk in its slot, it's not that bad if you spent 1,500 points to get Deadshot, although it's definitely not the optimal outcome. Of course, it does get a bit messy if you're talking about perks that need to be in the right slot to be good. They need their modifier. Getting Timeslip not in the modifier slot does suck. Or getting Victorious Tortoise in the modifier slot and being like, fuck, that's literally the best perk in the game, but it's in the modifier slot, and its modifier effect is garbage, and it's taken up the slot, but I don't want to get rid of it because it's so good. There are bad hits, but most of them are good. Most of the time when you go to hit Secret Source, you get Winter's Wails, Quick Revives, Staminups, Dying Wishes. You get decent perks. And I will say, if you do miss the more classic perk format, I do highly recommend just play games with 4 sets of Secret Source. I know it's a bit irregular, I know it's not the same as having perk machines on the map all over the place, but I really do think you'll probably find that experience much, much closer to what you're looking for out of a zombies game if you're not into the Black Ops 4 perk system, to just run 4 Secret Source, rather than having to select all your perks beforehand and all that. With all that said, that is my Black Ops 4 hardcore difficulty perk tier list. I must admit, it's only recently I've really gotten into playing hardcore difficulty, so if I learn more things about how some of these perks work or how hardcore works that I didn't know before, or maybe just through generally playing the mode more I might change some of my opinions, there's a chance I could quickly revisit this at some point and see if I really think my opinions held up here. But with the experience I've had so far, this is where I'd rank everything. And for as much as not everything on this list I'm rock solid on, I don't think I'm ever moving on thinking Victorious Tortoise and Winter's Wail are the two best perks on this difficulty by a mile. With all that said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.